new to campus, welcome. We're happy to see you here, and I hope that you come back many times. We have an array of exciting programs always happening here on campus, and we enjoy having our visitors come see what we're up to. So thank you so much for coming to the first event in this year's President's Lecture Series. I guess it was just last year, we started a new series of kind of signature events throughout the year, just doing a few each year, that really are about our larger strategic vision, highlighting our core values, and this is the first of those events for 2019. So I'm really thrilled that for that event, we have award-winning cartoonist Thi Bui here with us tonight. But before we have an introduction of Thi Bui, I want to tell you about a few of the things that are happening on campus. If you don't know by now, I'm not sure where you've been hiding, but this is our 140th anniversary. CCAD was founded in 1879, which is pretty exciting. So we have been making an incredible impact on the Columbus community and on the world's creative economy and ecology for those 140 years. So we have already had a number of events celebrating our 140th, and we will continue to have more throughout the year. Stay tuned for those. In particular, I don't want you to miss out on what's happening over the next 2 months. This is our big season. In April and May, we always have an array of really incredible events that are highlighting the best of what we do, the best of our students' work. So that starts with our MFA and now MDes thesis exhibition on Friday, April 5th. The very next day, you can just camp out overnight and stay here for the art fair, our semi-annual art sale of student and alumni work. And then in May, on Wednesday, May 8th, we have Chroma, the Best of CCAD, which is our big, again, end-of-year exhibition of student work. On Friday, May 10th, the fashion show, commencement the next day, it goes on and on. So you can find out about all of these events and many more, both on our website at ccad.edu/calendar, and also on a lovely paper calendar that is outside here if you haven't gotten one already. So again, please continue to come back and hang out with us, because we like to see you. In addition to that, I also want to make sure that I thank our various partners and sponsors for these events. All of this wonderful programming is due in part to support from the Greater Columbus Arts Council, the Ohio Arts Council, the Skestos Endowment Fund for Visiting Artists and Lectures, and CD 1025. And tonight's event in particular was made possible thanks in part to support from Puffin Foundation West. So let's give our supporters a round of applause. And a lot of these organizations who support us really want us to share with them who comes to these events. So I want to just ask one thing of you, which is, if you haven't already, when you walk out of here, there's a small table with a very simple short survey. If you could fill that out, we would be very grateful. It helps us continue to get grant money to support such wonderful public programming that is free to our entire community. So tonight's speaker, I'm going to turn it over in just one moment to Provost Donna Lance, who will introduce tonight's speaker. But I want to just say a quick personal note. Though I didn't have a chance to know her well, Thi Bui teaches on occasion in the MFA in Comics program at California College of the Arts, where I was before coming here 3 years ago, as of tomorrow, by the way. So I was really thrilled to find that we were reading her book amongst our entire sort of first year students as the common reading. And I think that in particular, her work serves as an incredible inspiration for our students, not only in how to make their creative work into a career, into a passion, into a life, but how to do so in a way that can have an incredible impact on the community at large and on so many parts of her community. So I just want to personally thank her for coming here tonight and sharing her amazing work with you all. And with that, I will turn it over to Provost Lance.
Thank you, Dr. Korn. I'm thrilled also to have Thi Bui here with us tonight. Thi Bui was born in Vietnam 3 months before the end of the Vietnam War and came to the United States in 1978 as part of the so-called Boat People wave of refugees from Southeast Asia. Her debut graphic memoir, The Best We Could Do, was selected as UCLA's Common Book for 2017, a National Book Critics Circle finalist in autobiography, and an Eisner Award finalist in reality-based comics. The book also made several best of 2017 book lists, including Bill Gates' top 5 picks. And I was also really excited when it was selected this year as the required reading for our first-year students in our Writing and Arts course. I got the book this summer and I read it immediately, and I hope all the students read it in the first few weeks of the semester. Thi is also the Caldecott honor-winning illustrator of A Different Pond, a picture book by the poet Bao Phi. Her short comics can be found online at the Nib, Pen America, and Boone, California. I expect you students to be checking that out, but not during the lecture. She is currently researching and drawing a work of graphic nonfiction about how Asian American Pacific Islanders are impacted by detention and deportation, to be published by One World Random House. Thi taught high school in New York City and was a founding teacher of Oakland International High School, the first public high school in California for recent immigrants and English learners. Since 2015, she has been a faculty member of the MFA in Comics program at the California College of Arts, and she lives in the Bay Area. Following her talk this evening, she will be signing copies of The Best We Could Do and A Different Pond, thanks to Gramercy Books. And we will have a reception, so please stick around. Now please join me in welcoming Thi Bui.
Hi everyone. Oh my God, there's a whole extra section in the back. I didn't realize. You can come closer if you want. There are seats up here. I love sitting in the audience when I'm getting introduced because it feels like they're talking about someone else. I still think of myself as, an immigrant kid from San Diego who was kind of dreamy and liked to take the bus down to the alternative neighborhood and check out the bookstores and the thrift stores. It was in San Diego, so I was weird for not being able to swim or surf and not being particularly athletic. So I think I was a lot like you all. I was a future art major, right? But the problem was that I didn't know how to be an artist because all of the artists and the writers that I admired were dead people. And I think that may have been a problem of how art was taught in school, or the fact that there were budget cuts, so I didn't really actually have any art classes. And it may have had something to do with that my parents were from another country and didn't have a direct connection with art and cultural production here. And also they were refugee and immigrant parents, so there was the financial worry of getting into school and then making a living with whatever it was that you learned in school. So I was lucky that my parents were educators and they were educated people, and so education was a known quantity for us. It was always known that we were gonna go to college. But it wasn't such a known thing about going to study art in college. So I guess I was lucky in the sense that they allowed me to do that. I had to pay my own way, so I went to a public university. I went to UC Berkeley, and like many immigrant children, I double majored in art and political science. And I quickly became enamored with the civil rights movement. I was really inspired by studying what lawyers had done to advance civil rights in the 1960s. And then I switched majors from political science to legal studies because I thought I was going to go to law school and fight for people's rights. But my sister, who was in law school at the time, talked me out of it. She said I would be much happier in art school. And so by a last minute decision, I applied to art school instead. And I went to the one that stood out as the only school that accepted me. Bard College had a low residency MFA program that was an interdisciplinary program. And they gave me some money, and the rest I begged, borrowed, and did I steal? Probably. And then I took off. 2 weeks after graduating from college, I took off to a graduate program against the advice of some of my professors. They said that I should just try to be a practicing artist first. But again, I didn't know what that meant. And so silly me, I thought, oh, well, you go to more school to learn more stuff as an artist. And I had the rude awakening of getting to a studio program where there were a lot of New Yorkers, and they all seemed to know each other, and they seemed to know where all the hip galleries were and who the hip contemporary artists were. I knew like 3 because they had been my professors in undergraduate. So I had a hard time when I first went to art school, like art school. I felt like an outsider. I felt like a fake. I almost flunked out. Not because I didn't work hard, but because actually I went to the wrong school, it turns out. It was a pretty formalist program, and I kept getting in trouble for making work that was too narrative, which is why I'm so excited that there's a comics and narrative program here, because there is an art to telling stories and telling them well. So after I almost flunked out of the MFA program, where I have a degree in sculpture that I don't use at all, I figured out that I needed to be around storytellers and I needed to learn from them. But I was also really mad about this whole elite art world in New York, and I really wanted to make art accessible to outsiders like me. So I figured I would just go teach it to teenagers in New York. So I got myself into another master's program with a full ride because I met a professor who was just as mad at me as I was about the division between the insiders and the outsiders. So I started teaching in New York public city schools, and I had a ton of fun. I learned a lot. And then I also had this dream about learning more about myself and my parents. And it was around, I think it was because when I first went to graduate school, I told my professors at age 22 or 23 that I was interested in exploring my Asian American identity, which seems normal, but there wasn't anybody there to support me in that journey. And in fact, I got a lot of pushback. I got one professor asking me, why should I care about your Asian American identity? Which now as a teacher, I'm like, that's a really hostile thing to say to a young person. And at the time, I didn't have the wherewithal to cuss him out. I got lots of things I could say now. One of which would be like, well, why should I have to read 10,000 versions of Catcher in the Rye? But I do. And you, sir, know very little about me, but I know so much about your culture. And that may be an advantage. So I'm in the position now of starting to help tip that balance. There's so many more writers now write from the margins that they are no longer the margins. Minority writers no longer need to write as minority writers because it doesn't make sense in a changing America to do so. And so I just write for what I call the plurality, and understanding that my audience is not one dominant majority to which I need to translate myself. It is a plurality of people with very different experiences from each other and from me. And so I actually put on my educator hat when I think about audiences now. I think about differentiating for different kinds of learners, visual people, kinesthetic people. I think about people with experiences like my own, and I do stuff for them. Like, for example, It's very important to me to have all the diacritical marks in Vietnamese correct so that readers of Vietnamese could actually read the words and it made sense to them. But I was also explaining the history of a country to people that I knew wouldn't have the same connection to it. But that was okay because I was wearing my educator hat and this was in the name of sharing. So all this is to say that I'm much happier now than when I started because I have found a way to take the things that I was angry about as a young person who didn't feel that powerful and felt like an outsider. And now I'm able to mash all of my interests, the social sciences, the political activism, the art, and the identity exploration, the personal and the political, all into my work. And it is such an amazing thing to get to do that. And then to actually be able to make a living from it is the dream. And there's not a single day that goes by where I am not blown away by that. So I will do my best to be honest about how one gets there and the windy path that it takes to realize your dreams. And then I'll also be happy to answer any of your questions afterwards. But first, I want to entertain you a little bit. And it is a sad story, but I want to give you full permission to laugh at the parts that are funny, because some of it is silly. So I picked out an excerpt tonight that has parts that I would like people from the audience to help me read, if that's all right. I could use some voice actors. So it's a graphic memoir, which means, as my mother says, it's 99% true. We're just gonna treat these people as characters, and I'm gonna ask some of you to play these characters and treat it like an exercise in empathy, just like trying on somebody else's shoes for a minute. So the characters are my sisters, who I call Lan and Bic in the book, my mother, who I call Ma, my father, who I call Bo, and 3-year-old me. So I would like someone of any gender to play my mother, Ma. And what you'll do is you'll just wear a microphone and your lines will be up here and you'll just read them off with as much or as little expression as you feel like tonight, but a lot is always better. Do I have any takers? Oh, excellent. Will you come to the front? And I'm gonna actually give you the special mic. All right. Thank you, Angela, for being my mother. Who would like to be my father? Bo? Let's see. Oh, great. You're in the front row already. Why don't you come sit next to your wife? What's your name?
I'm Nina.
Nina. Thank you for reading. So you're going to be Bo, and I'm going to hand you a microphone as well. Hello?
Oh. Great cast. I like the proactive
All right. I need someone who is still connected to their inner child to play my sister Bic. Yes, you had your hand up earlier. What's your name? Billy. Billy, would you also play my cousin in America? Great. And actually, would you play all the kids? Okay, so there's the baby. He's got 2 lines. They're both crying. There's my sister Bic, my sister Lan, and little me. Okay? All right, so you're going to share a microphone with Bo. And then this is a smaller part. I need someone to play this woman diver in the refugee camp, and also these 2 women in the airport. Small part. Yes, great, come on up. And, okay, I need someone else to play the other child, this little boy named Vu. It's a small-ish part. Any takers? Oh, great, thank you so much. And what's your name? Stephanie. Your first line is gonna be Bick from Aurora School, and you just have to remember to pronounce it Bick. Okay, who here can do a really good French accent? Anyone? Or a really bad one is fine too. Yes, okay, you wanna do it? All right, great. So, in addition to being my mother, you will be the French priest, my Uncle Hai, and this elderly man in the airport. Is that cool? This is amazing. Actually, somebody else did this at University of Houston too, and it was like incredible, the range. Okay. What's that? Airports. Wait, so you are my mother, right?
Yes.
Okay. Are you my mother? You are. All right. So French priest, Uncle Hai, and the elderly man in the airport. Okay. I need someone with an authoritative voice to play the small part as the doctor, who gives some bad news and then some good news. Okay, perfect. And then, okay, I need a couple of Red Cross workers. It could be just one person. Perfect, thank you, I love this. And then the last role is Tom Rivers, charity worker. He has some funny lines. What's that? Is there a line? Oh, perfect. Do you want to come forward into the front row, and then I'll give you the last microphone. Pass it back and forth. Here you go. All right. Does everybody remember their parts? Does anyone need a review? Okay. Okay, let me just get a drink of water. All right, everybody. I'm going to take you back across time and space to a refugee camp that no longer exists. The year is 1978. It's 3 years after the end of the Vietnam War that has torn apart a country. The South Vietnam, where the capital is Saigon, has fallen. My family happened to be on the losing side of the Civil War. My parents were idealists. They stayed behind when everyone else was fleeing the country because they thought they were teachers and this was their country and they would stay and help rebuild the country. But after 3 years of trying, they realized that there actually was no place for them in this new Vietnam, and there was no future for their children. So in a final last act of desperation, they packed their 3-year-old me and their 2 young daughters into the cargo hold of a riverboat and set out to sea with just the faint hope that we would land somewhere and another country would take us in. And it was a totally illegal thing to do at the time, and a few other attempts went bust. So by the time we were successfully able to get onto a boat to leave Vietnam, my mother was also 8 months pregnant. Miraculously, my father learned how to drive a boat 3 days and 3 nights and got us to the eastern side of peninsular Malaysia, where we landed at night, were arrested, and then taken to a refugee camp. And a refugee camp is nothing but a bottleneck of people seeking a new home. In March of 1978, when we arrived at Pulau Besar, there were already 3,000 people at the camp. Every week, a delegation came from a different country: France, Canada, Australia, the US. to interview people wanting to resettle there.
France. Oh, we'll go to France. We speak the language.
Who do we know there, though?
Any choice was a gamble. My parents decided our futures on very little information.
You already have 2 sisters in America, and we know a little English. Maybe we could teach French in America.
For children, camp was, in many ways, a wonderful vacation. No school.
Let's watch the ladies dive for shellfish.
Want to ride on my back?
Yeah. Gonna practice floating.
An escape from regular life.
Vic from Aurora School, is that you?
Vu, what are you doing here? And why are you still wearing our own school uniform?
My family just arrived. They didn't tell me where we were going. They just picked me up from school one day. And now I'm here.
Can I have a little privacy, please?
For Ma, there was the worry of how to have and care for a newborn baby in a refugee camp.
Wonderful French, madam. Surely someone like you has other resources.
Ma was so humiliated by Pepe and by having to beg, and so upset at having her honesty questioned. She went into labor that evening.
And still no diapers. Hold on, sis.
The struggle to bring a life into the world is rewarded by that cry. It is a single-minded effort, uncluttered and clear at its objective. What follows afterward, that is the rest of that child's life, is another story. Daily life was not easy. Water came out of ditches dug by previous residents and had to be boiled before drinking. Wood for boiling and cooking had to be gathered from the dwindling forest surrounding the camp. There were no proper toilets. Bo would take us a little further out each day to relieve ourselves and bring back firewood. Yet we were among the lucky ones. Our stay there was only a few months.
Us.
Other side of the world, Ma's older sister Dao and her husband acted as our US sponsors and processed our paperwork quickly. The Red Cross helped us get our plane tickets, and my parents promised to repay them once they had jobs. In Kuala Lumpur, we got our immunizations and our health cleared.
Ow! Ouch.
All except for Bo.
There were scars on your lung. Oh, is this me?
No, it's me. There were scars on your lung x-ray. You need to stay so we can take a closer look.
How long? My family leaves tomorrow.
I don't know. We'll have to wait and see.
Said their goodbyes at the church where we slept.
I borrowed $30 from an old student back at the camp. I used some of it to buy new outfits for the kids. We don't need much else. Take this for your trip.
And the next morning,
Does anyone here speak English?
A little.
That's great. We need you two to help this group get to where they're going.
But I have 4 children. Don't worry, my wife can watch your kids.
There were about 100 people who needed Ma to show them to their gates, help them check in, and fill out forms. We sat with the elderly couple, absorbed by the Hershey bar that Ma had bought for us. Finally,
It's time for us to get back on the plane.
flight attendant gave Ma a bassinet for the baby, but he cried every time she tried to put him down. She had only one cloth diaper for him, so every time he peed, she dried him with napkins and folded the cloth to move the wet spots.
Just don't poop, okay?
My sisters and I got an airplane pin and juice, which kept us content. Then the chaos of getting in and out of Los Angeles. Customs, baggage, connecting flights. Oh no, this is Mom.
You go to the gate 7 over there. Hurry, they're calling your flight. You go to Terminal 3. Follow the signs.
Wait, which way did you say, miss? No, please, miss, take us there. We're scared we'll get lost.
After helping everyone else, Ma realized
Oh no, our flight's about to leave.
finally, on June 28, 1978, we arrived at Chicago O'Hare Airport. My sisters Dow and one of her daughters were there to meet us.
Welcome to America.
Meanwhile, back in Kuala Lumpur,
Have scars from tuberculosis, but no infection. You are cleared to go.
Kuala Lumpur Airport. Like Ma, Bo was called upon to use his limited English to help the other refugees traveling.
Listen, there's been an airline strike. We had to get you all new tickets.
In Los Angeles, distracted by the needs of others, Bo actually did miss his own flight.
No, what did I do?
Through broken English, a lot of gesturing, and eventually a supervisor who spoke French, Bo got on a late flight to Anchorage, Alaska. He spent his first night in America on a bench in the airport. Bo's attempts to call Ma's sister on a payphone were unsuccessful. His experience in Los Angeles left him too nervous to leave his waiting area to go buy food. When he finally arrived at Chicago O'Hare Airport, his belly was as empty as his morale was low.
Excuse me, are you from Vietnam?
Yes.
I'm Rivers from U.S. Catholic Charities. I come here every day to see if there are any refugees arriving. Where are you going? Unbelievable. I know that man. I go to his house every day for a bowl of pho.
Why is it so ugly here?
You don't like it?
Hammond, Indiana, 2 hours later.
Surprise!
Oh my god.
That night, we slept reunited under the same roof in a new country. Me, my baby brother, Bo and Ma, and Lan and Vic. In a 2-bedroom house with my aunt, her husband, their 5 children, and 1 dog. Thank you so much. And thank you to the readers. all the microphones. Give me a sec. So, microphones are a lot of fun. I first discovered that I liked microphones working the drive-through at Burger King in the 10th grade. I didn't get to wear one of those headsets though. You had to stand by the window and push a pedal to make the microphone work. All this to say, you don't have to go to school to find your passion. Sometimes it finds you. I feel a lot of guilt. I think like most people who have a good life, who have not always had it so good, I became a public school teacher to give back and also to do better than some of the public school teachers that I had. 'Cause, I went to some okay and then some really not okay public schools, and I thought it was too bad, like the missed opportunities to help people, and especially like kids of color or poorer kids. Like I went to school with a bad reputation. It was interesting, like the immigrant family trajectory, like that was mine. Like we went from being like dirt poor and being on welfare for the first 3 years in America to all of us doing really well in school. And my mom like taking night classes and like lunchtime classes and like just like working her way up in an electronics company. Like she started at the very bottom, earning minimum wage, putting like circuit boards together on an assembly line, to becoming like a drafter after she took classes, and then like going into management. And so by the time she did that, we became middle class and we could afford to move out of the apartment building and into a house. We were still renting it, but it was like a big deal, I remember. And I was in the 9th grade, I think, when we moved. And ironically, moving to this nicer house in a nicer neighborhood put me in the zone for a school that had a bad reputation. So I tried to get out of going there, but like I had to go there because it was in my zone in San Diego. But it turns out the reason that the school had a bad reputation was because it was full of poor kids and people of color. So it ended up being a wonderful thing, and I think it changed my life to be in a school where like 40 different languages were spoken, and there was no divide between rich and poor. Like everybody was pretty much like working class, or like slightly middle class, but not too far along. So everybody kind of was in the same boat and got along in a different way. I think it was a really big deal for me to be normalized for the first time, to have like all these other kids who also came from immigrant and refugee backgrounds. And, like my experience wasn't particularly different, and I didn't have to hide it. Like we all just were who we were. But unfortunately, I think that expectations of us were kind of low, coming from the teachers, and so we weren't really groomed to go to college. Like very few of us made it into like the advanced classes, and like those kids got given the attention and were told what to do to apply for college, and everybody else was like in vocational classes or just shuffled into the community college next door afterwards. So later on, when I'd had it with the art world and I wanted to do something useful, I thought about how I could go back and, using my experience, do something a little bit better for kids in inner city schools. So I started teaching in Brooklyn and had a great time. I really liked the troublemakers. And then when I had a child, I wanted to move out west, closer to my family, and I helped start a school in Oakland for recent immigrants and English language learners. And public schools are just really, really important to me as a place where the promise of democracy, still lives. Even if there are a lot of problems with a lot of public schools, it's like there is this promise in the idea that in a public school, everybody gets mixed together and everybody gets the same opportunity to learn, and they do it side by side. And that is an aspiration that I still work towards when I fight for public schools. So one of the things that I did recently, even though I'm no longer a public high school teacher, is I supported the Oakland teacher strike, which happened a couple of weeks ago and resolved with a negotiation. But I did this with a group of artists that I call the art hackers. And it came about in the last few months because I realized that in the last couple of years I've developed a lot of community organizing contacts. And I've been doing a lot of this stuff on my own where I am the only artist that a lot of these organizations know. And so they're always contacting me to do artwork for their next campaign. And it is impossible to keep up with the workload because it's all free work. So I realized that I also had all of these artist contacts who were kind of shy, introverted, amazing artists who don't know how to organize. So I was like, I'll just bring them together into one room. The model is quite simple. I find I take an existing organization, usually a local one in the Bay Area that I know well, I've worked with, so I vetted them, they're good, and they do good work. And I asked them to host a dinner, so they pay for dinner. I invite the artists, I get like 10 or 12 of them to come. We have 2 hours together where the artists learn about like the issue that the organization is working on. They get educated in the first half, and in the second half, they brainstorm with the person from the organization about ways in which artists can help spread the message or deepen the message or just get the word out. And so we've done a few of these art hacks, and they're really fun. They're nice. The first one, we helped spread the message about public charge for Asian health services. The second one, we worked with Asian Law Caucus in San Francisco to educate the public about the Muslim ban. And I actually got Raina Telgemeier. Does anyone know Raina Telgemeier? She's like the best-selling comics artist ever. She wrote Smile and Drama and Sisters. Another artist wrote the script for an 8-panel comic that's about like the history of the Muslim ban. She volunteered to illustrate it like amazingly, and she's busy. You know, she's like finishing her next graphic novel right now. She illustrated it and then asked me to color and letter it. So we banged this out in like 2 weeks and put it up online right away. And I think if you just Google Raina Telgemeier, Thi Bui, Muslim ban, you'll get to this comic. Another thing that I work on is there's a local organization called Asian Prisoner Support Committee that does reentry work for formerly incarcerated folks who are now trying to like transition to like real life outside prison. And the reason that it's an Asian specific group is that there aren't very many supports for the reentry population. That's Asian American, Pacific Islander. They're actually in prison. There isn't even an Asian American category. Like, especially in men's prisons, you get categorized by your race as soon as you enter the prison system. So like you're white, you're black, or you're Latinx, or you're other. And Asians fall under other, which means that like their myriad cultural needs and issues are not addressed. One of the things that I'm researching is what I call the shadow story to my own story. So hundreds of thousands of people came here in the late 70s and 80s as refugees from Southeast Asia. So we call it the Vietnam War, but Laos and Cambodia were also devastated by US bombings. Laos still has unexploded bombs that live in the ground and like kill people all the time. Cambodia was completely destabilized, and the Khmer Rouge rose to power in the chaos that was created by all of the US bombings. And the Khmer Rouge then killed 2 million people, and they targeted artists and writers. So there's a whole generation that has had its artistic voice silenced. as a direct impact of the US intervention. So a lot of Cambodians who came here as refugees are not educated as Vietnamese refugees. They come with a lot of PTSD because they witnessed so much violence. And they were resettled in really, really poor neighborhoods in the US, including Stockton, California, where on top of all of that, there was a school shooter who came to this elementary school and targeted Southeast Asian kids. And the little children that died that day in the early 80s were all like Southeast Asian refugees. So PJ, one of the men that I'm interviewing, actually saw his 7-year-old cousin shot to death that day by the shooter. And a few years later, he, carrying that violence on top of the violence that his family fled, was dealing with bullying on the streets, gangs, and so he found protection in a gang and then got involved in a store robbery with this gang, and it ended up in an accidental shooting and death. He turned himself in, and he was 14 years old at the time of the shooting. I think he turned himself in when he was 15, and then was sentenced really, really harshly. He's one of the youngest people in California to get sentenced as an adult, and was given a life sentence. He was paroled because he turned his life around in prison and actually became like a domestic violence counselor, a sexual violence counselor for men, got his GED, helped a lot of other people while in prison. And so they will let you out a little bit early when you can prove this. However, because he's an immigrant, he lost his status because of the crime that he committed. So instead of being allowed to come back to regular life upon parole, he was released to ICE detention and given an order of removal to be sent to a Cambodia that he wasn't even born in, because he was born in a refugee camp in Thailand because his mother had been fleeing the Khmer Rouge. And PJ is just one of thousands of people in the same situation that I'm learning about. So the next book is a work of graphic nonfiction called Nowhere Land, and it is about our system of detention and deportation that is all linked up with mass incarceration and the really harsh anti-drug and anti-crime laws that we passed in the 1990s. Hopefully it'll come out in 2020. I'm not known to be fast. I feel like I have a fire under my chair because real lives are on the line here, and I'm not talking about the past, I'm talking about people who are in detention or in danger of deportation, so I'm trying to do it as fast as I can. Here's another one of the guys. His daughter was 5 months old at the time that I drew this, and she's over a year, she's almost 2 now. Here's another family that is like fighting for bringing the dad back from Vietnam. He's already been deported, but there's something about his case that makes it possible to reopen it because laws keep changing, right? We passed really harsh laws back in the day, and then we go back and revisit those laws because we realized that they were too harsh. And so changing laws retroactively like that actually changes people's possibilities to fight for their cases. So this is Rexy and her 4 daughters, and her husband Chu is in Ho Chi Minh City right now and trying to figure out how to come back to his family. So if you'd like to support them, this is the link to go to see their fundraiser for legal funds. And also there's a link to an amazing profile written in the New York Times about them that came out on Valentine's Day, because their love story is really beautiful. They met in middle school. Oops. When I'm not thinking about detention and deportation, I'm thinking about the really light topic of climate change. I think it's because I spent so long thinking about Vietnam's past that I really wanted to spend some time thinking about its present and future. And I've always been concerned about environmental issues, but I felt like there was some weird thing about the way that climate change was being presented to us that was like a bit abstract. And also like not taking into account that the world is big and there's a lot of wealth inequality in the world. Like 6 or 7 billionaires own as much as the poor half of the world. And so what this means is that when climate change comes, it comes earlier for the poor folks of the planet. And that has a ripple effect on those of us who are privileged enough to live in the wealthier nations with wider buffers, because it impacts where people want to live. So at the same time that we're thinking about building a wall at our southern border, borders everywhere are going to be affected by migration because of climate change. And I thought that this was the future where there were going to be a lot more migrants because of climate change, but it's already a fact now that there are more people displaced by climate change than there are people displaced by conflict. So this is our collective future. So what are we doing closing down borders? Clearly, that's not a viable solution in the long term. So I'm interested in figuring out how are people addressing the issue of climate change, and how are they doing it in places not like the US? So I'm interested in the global south, the poorer half of the world, where there's a lot of danger, there's a lot of death already. There's also this incredible resilience that I think we can actually learn a lot from. And then the last light topic that I'm exploring is current refugees. This summer I'm going to be going to an island in Greece called Lesbos that has a giant refugee camp called Moria. It was built for 2,000 or 3,000 and it currently has over 9,000 people stuck there because European countries are closing down their borders and not taking any more refugees. The US has capped the number of refugees at 30,000 per year, I believe, and we're nowhere even near there. So there are all these people bottlenecked in a refugee camp. There are 2 refugee camps, actually. And they are not Vietnamese, they're Syrian, they're Afghan, Iraqi, Somali, and Eritrean. And I'm going there to try to find a personal connection between my past as a boat person and these people who arrived in Greece by boat as well. And try to figure out how to ethically tell their story in a way that could maybe help impact policy. And then this is the actual light thing that I'm working on. I'm also working on a children's book that should be out later this year in the fall. It kind of came about as a joke. Do you know Viet Thanh Nguyen, the writer of The Sympathizer? Won a Pulitzer, very serious, successful Vietnamese-American writer. I met his son, who's 5 and adorable. His name is Ellison. He hung out with us for a week at a writer's residency, and he, much to his father's chagrin, he doesn't want to be a writer, he wants to be an artist. So I hung out with him, and we drew together. I gave him piggyback rides, and at the end of this, he told his dad, "I'm going to be an artist, and I have a storybook idea, and I'd like to dictate it to you." And so his dad wrote it out. And it's called Chicken of the Sea. It's about chickens who become pirates. And then, I don't know, like an editor at McSweeney's took interest, and she said, "Pitch it to me." And he was like, "For real?" She said, "For real." This was on Facebook. So he's like, "Okay." So then they were like, "We're interested in publishing this Chicken of the Sea. We would actually like a real illustrator to draw it at maybe Thi Bui." And I was like, "Thi's busy doing a book about deportation, but I have a son who actually has a lot of the same sensibilities as Ellison. He's 13, so he draws a little bit better than Ellison." So I don't know, they said yes. So Viet and his little boy are the writers, and me and my little boy, he's actually 13, so he's not so little anymore, are the illustrators. And my son thinks it's hilarious that his boss is a 5-year-old. But so these are my son's drawings, and I'm going to be coloring them. And so I don't know how much time we have, but we've got 15? 10. Okay, we've got 10 minutes. All right, that's enough time for some dialogue. I would like to be useful to you, so feel free to ask me anything, and I'll try to keep my answers concise so we can get a lot of questions. And there are microphones.
Could I,
Ask someone to pass the microphones around, or thank you so much, Josh.
You mentioned before your mom said memoirs were like 99% true. How did they take the publication of your book? What were their thoughts about it?
Short answer is they still love me. But I had to get smarter about it and not surprise them with stuff, because I felt strongly that you should portray people with their warts and all. So it wouldn't be a very nice thing to like hide it from them and then show it to them when it was public. So I showed my parents rough drafts of the chapters as I was working on it so that they would have a chance to talk to me about any issues that they have. But actually they were really generous and they just remembered more stuff. So the editing process was like this really nice collaborative thing where I would jog their memory by drawing out their reconstructed memories, and they would give me like constructive feedback on how to make everything more accurate, or they would just like add more detail.
After you wrote this book, how do you advertise your book? How do you get people to buy? How do you find someone to publish it and have it all around the store? Like, what was that process that you took into finishing the book and then, take it out on the world and let everyone know it? Thank you.
Big question. I did it all a little bit haphazardly because, like, as I told you, I didn't know any real artists for a while. So a lot of it was just being willing to jump into things that I didn't know about and try stuff out. One of the first things that I did was I applied to an artist residency when I was like in the very, very early stages of working on it, because I wanted to be around like living, working cartoonists. So I got a mentor out of that. Craig Thompson, who wrote Blankets, became my mentor, and he introduced me to this other graphic memoir called Vietnam America by J.B. Tran, and it was coming out just as I was starting work on mine. So I thought like, that's just gonna kill my project. No one's gonna want to publish my book because like one just like it already exists. And I wanted to kill GB, but instead I stalked him and I emailed him and I got him to do a collaborative comic with me that we published together in Hyphen magazine, like an Asian American arts magazine. And that got noticed by a young editorial assistant in New York at Abrams Comic Arts. So she wrote to me, she sent me a message on LinkedIn. So keep your LinkedIn account. Keep all your social media accounts, because strangers can contact you. And once in a while they want to read your stuff. So also tell everybody that you're working on stuff so that you can't quit. That's the other thing that I did. She was very generous in saying that she saw a lot of promise in my story and she really liked my writing. She didn't think my art was quite up to snuff, but she said that if I was willing to work with her on like getting it up to the level that it should be at in order to pitch it to her publisher, that she would help me through that process. And that took about 6 or 7 months to like create 20 pages of finished art and an outline for the whole book. And I also was already self-publishing the first 3 chapters at the time so that I could learn how to like do DIY publishing. I realized after tabling at half a dozen comics conventions that I really hate tabling and I wanted to have a mainstream publisher just publish the whole book. That was like a personal choice for me because I don't really like interacting with people at a commerce level. Some people are really good at that. I prefer to do this kind of talk where we're talking about ideas. So I wanted to be in the book world. So I went the book world route, which is you need an editor, you need an agent to get you into the hands of editors who are going to consider your work for publication. And then if you go with a publisher that is large enough, they usually have a sales and marketing department whose job it is to get the book out to bookstores. I have an amazing publicist who does everything that's not marketing. So marketing is basically all the stuff that they pay for. So, and then publicity is all the stuff that they can get for free, like reviews, podcast interviews, radio interviews, TV interviews, that kind of thing. And she has her contacts, and then I also had my contacts, and we worked together to make a pretty modest tour schedule at first. They didn't actually have too much money invested in me to like go around a lot to promote the book at the beginning until the good reviews started coming in. And then they realized, oh, this is actually something worth investing in. So, you know, a few comics conventions turned into like a whole book tour. And then now, actually, I don't try to promote the book anymore. I'm lucky enough that people are asking me to come to their school. That's a very long answer. There isn't one way to do it, but that's how I did it.
How do you know that your art, especially about immigration, is very impactful? I know it contributes somehow, but how do you know how much it's impactful on the politics itself?
On politics itself, right? I try to have. I try to work with organizations that are already doing work, because it's one thing to make art, and it's another thing to make art that's going to be seen by certain people, or that tries to influence like a particular bill or policy. Like, I think, and you just have to know the right people. So it's actually not necessarily what you put in your art. It's who you know, who you're working with. So if I'm making campaign posters for a particular person who is petitioning the California governor for his pardon, I have a much better chance of having an impact on something real than if I was just like posting my own art about my feelings about deportation, but not directing it at any particular thing in real life. So I think like artists need to situate themselves among organizers in order to be impactful. And if they don't know organizers, then it's pretty easy to start volunteering and start like researching like who the helpers are, and just volunteering your time with them.
I just wanted to ask you how having a family has affected your career, and how do you find balance between your following your dreams and making time for your loved ones, as well as yourself and your own mental health?
Family makes everything take longer. Yeah, it took me forever to get the book done because I was trying to do it on weekends and summer vacations. And like there was never enough time to like really sink my teeth into it. As soon as I would get deep into a chapter, I'd have to go back to work. And you know, younger kids are a lot of work. So it took me 10, 12 years to get this first book done, because I was teaching full time and raising a child who was pretty young. But I don't think I would do it any other way, because I think that I got a chance to grow up a lot in that 10, 12 years, and that changed the book also. I think if I had gotten it done in a couple of years when I was in my late 20s, it would be a very different book. So I count my blessings that I didn't quit. I didn't quit because I told everybody I was doing this thing, and the shame of quitting would have been just too great. And I think that the sacrifice of being an artist also adds some weight to the book. And oddly enough, I actually think that I was my most productive in some ways when my son was a baby. Because if I had a 2-hour window, I actually drew and wrote for the full 2 hours, whereas now I have more time, and I feel like time is kind of like water. It just, water will just seep into as much space as you give it. And actually sometimes when you compress it into a short amount of time, it's more potent. So actually when I was like in deadline mode for the book, I had like a few months left to finish it. And I wasn't feeling like I was working hard enough. I just didn't feel stressed out enough. I was way too relaxed. I was like, how do I recreate the adrenaline rush that I had when my son was a baby? I was like, oh, I know, I'm gonna foster some kittens. So I went to the Humane Society and I picked up a litter of kittens that were so young that you have to bottle feed them, you have to heat up their milk, and you have to stimulate their bums so that they can go pee and poop every 2 hours. It's really intense, but it worked. So it turns out that I have this crazy maternal adrenaline. And so when I wasn't taking care of the kittens, I was working on my book, and it was just kicked me back into gear. And after a month, I gave the kittens back, and I was primed. And then I was working, and I finished the book.
Question?
So I was thinking, since it took you around 12 or 13 years to write this, did you ever think that your art style would change so drastically during it that the beginning chapter would look completely different from the last one?
Yeah, I had to redraw a lot of it. It sucked.